Genesis chapter 3, verses 4 through 5. We'll be doing both verses because it represents the response of the serpent to the woman. And in the prior couple of videos, we saw how both of them have misrepresented the commandment of God. And now we'll see Satan actually directly negate the commandment of God. Kai apen ha-ophis te gunaiki, u thanato apathanestha, ede gar ha-theos hati, in heon hemera, fagete ap altu, and then we'll continue here in a minute with the rest of the verse. Let's start with this first verb, apen. That's again from Lego. We've seen this numerous times. Third singular aorist there. And so someone said, and it is the ophis. This is the serpent. The serpent said to the woman. So now we have his response. U thanato here. So thanato is the dative of death, thanatos. And then it is combined with apothnesko, and this is a second plural future middle indicative. You see the aestha ending, you see the root change from apothnesko, it's a future. And so he basically says, not in death will you die. Now, why it seems to be somewhat redundant what's going on here. Well, the underlying Hebrew is actually like that as well. The underlying Hebrew is lo mot tamutun, which is basically not dying shall you die. This is an infinitive absolute in Hebrew, followed by a call imperfect. And the representation of both constituent elements, this initial verb followed by its actual verb, if you want to call it that, often is picked up in the Greek Pentateuch. In this case, it is picked up with a noun followed by a verb. Sometimes you'll see this first element be a participle that'll represent that infinitive absolute. And so I think this is the first time we've seen it going through Genesis and the verses we've done. But that is a very common feature in the translation. So not dying or not in death shall you die. He explains why. Ade is from oida. This is a third singular, see the EI ending. But that form is actually a pluperfect active indicative. And then for. So for, God knows that. And so he's now going to try to represent the mindset of God in some sense. In he on hemera. Now that is going to initially seem a little bit clunky because you have a preposition here followed by the dative as is normal, but it's a dative relative pronoun and it's not referring back to anything. Typically you have the referent of a relative pronoun be outside the relative clause, somewhere up here. But actually, the referent is embedded in the clause. This is known as an internal antecedent. You also have the particle on here, which casts it in a sort of whenever or something like that. And so it's basically in which day or on the day in which. And then fagete here is from estheo. You see the te ending, you see the root change, and a lengthening of the connecting vowel. That all tells us it's a second plural aorist active subjunctive here. And it's subjunctive again because of this on. So on the day in which you eat from it, that is from this tree that God has said not to eat. So that's the first chunk here. Let's continue. What's going to happen according to Satan, according to the serpent, when you eat from that tree? Dianoik thesuntai humon hoi ophthalmoi, kai essis the host theoi, genoskantis kalon kai poneron. It's a very bold claim he makes here. Starts with this big verb, dianoik thesuntai. That is from dianoigo. And if you know anoigo, that means to open. And so this is a compound form, but it still basically means open. That big ending, thesuntai here, is a third plural future passive indicative. Plural, something will be open in the future, and it's your eyes. Notice the humon here is fronted, but is referring to the ophthalmoi. So on the day in which you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. And then what will happen? Essesta, that is a second plural future middle of ami. You will be hos theoi. You will be as gods. Interesting plural there of theos. And what will that be like? Gnoskantes there. This is from gnosko, as you probably recognize with that ontes ending here. This is a nominative plural masculine, present active participle. So knowing, and what will you know when you're as gods? You will know kalan kai paneron, good and evil. So that is Satan's claim as to what will happen when you eat from the fruit of that tree. Very bold that you will be as gods there. Well, let's take a step back here. He is, again, referring back to Genesis 2:17, which we've seen. That's kind of been their source text, really, for the woman and the serpent's conversation. But let's notice what he has done. Let's start with this bottom one. You'll be as gods, knowing good and evil. He's picking that up from the idea this tree is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Notice you have gnosko here, then you have kalon and paneron, nicely matching. So he is, in some sense, picking up on that about the tree. He also very clearly is drawing on almost the exact syntax of the on which day phageta. So far, he's actually kind of in opal 2 as well. He's, in a certain sense, reflecting somewhat accurately the words of God in the garden so far. But here's the real issue. Whenever he actually talks about the commandment itself, which is thanato apathanesta here, we see that as thanato apathanesta. That's what God had said. Dying, you will die. But he negates it, says you will not die in death whenever you eat from that tree. So that's his critical claim, as he is very much subverting the very commandment of God and promising what God certainly did not promise with his prohibition of eating from that tree. So Satan, as always, as we see even in the Gospels, whenever he is going to bat with Jesus in the wilderness and twist Scripture, he is a deceiver from the very beginning, and he's doing that here with God's command.